Welcome to our webinar. So we will kick things off as it's just hit 4 o'clock in the afternoon here in New Zealand. So my name is Charlotte Stockman. I'm one of the senior licensed advisors at New Zealand Shores, and I am based in our Hamilton office. I'm joined by my colleague Fabien, who is also one of our senior licensed advisors in our head office here in Hamilton as well. Just a little bit of housekeeping. If you've got any questions, please feel free to pop them in the Q&A section rather than the chat. We will try and get through as many questions as we can. Some we will answer while the other person is speaking, and some we will answer live at the end. So today's session really is just a bit of information about us as a company, New Zealand and Australian Shores, and life in New Zealand and the visa processes that you may be eligible for. Cool. Can you jump on to the next slide, Fabien?
Sure, let's go.
Perfect. So a little bit about us. New Zealand Shores was founded in 2009. So we are in our 16th year this year. We are a team of 12 licensed advisors, and some of our advisors have experience on both sides of the job. So what that means is some of our licensed advisors have also worked for Immigration New Zealand, which means that we get some really great insight into how Immigration New Zealand process visas, and it's actually helped us develop a wealth of knowledge that kind of sets us above other advisors in terms of knowing all those small pitfalls that may occur during the visa process, and we can help you mitigate those. Our team is really diverse. So out of our entire team, only 3 of us were actually born in New Zealand. So that's our directors, Sarah and Ellen, and myself. The rest of our team, while most of them are now residents and citizens, have all migrated from different parts of the world. So we've got a total of 10 nationalities within our team. What I think is really cool about that is they know what that migration process is like. They've been through it themselves. They know how stressful it is. So they can really hold your hand and understand on a deeper level what that process feels like for you. We do also have, I know today's largely about New Zealand, but we do also have some Australian advisors in our team who are MARA registered. And we've got offices in New Zealand and South Africa. So we've got a global presence, which means we can cater to different time zones. So we've got 3 offices here in New Zealand. We've got our head office here in Hamilton, which is where Fabien and I are based. And then we also have an office in Nelson, which is at the top of the South Island, and then an office in Christchurch, which is one of the South Island's biggest cities. So just our agenda for today, we're going to go over what life in New Zealand looks like, and then some New Zealand visas, what that job search process may look like, because if you're coming as a skilled migrant, which many of you will be, you will need a job offer to be able to apply for visas and migrate to New Zealand, and what those opportunities will look like for you. And then, as I mentioned, we'll wrap up with a bit of a Q&A at the end. So just a few facts about New Zealand. That little picture on the left-hand side there is very accurate. Nobody lives here. So we are quite a large landmass with a very small population. So our population is currently 5.2 million people. And those white patches on that map are actually where people live. So for the vast majority of New Zealand, there is actually a lot of space for us to grow into. And that means a lot of space for you to explore and enjoy nature as well, which is what New Zealand is really known for. A few fun facts. We have 5 sheep to every person here in New Zealand. So we are quite famous for our lamb and our sheep products. And being the fact that we are 2, well, actually we're 3 islands here in New Zealand, you are always closer than 128 k's from the ocean. So even where we're based in Hamilton, which is one of our bigger landlocked cities, we have beaches on either coast. One is only about 40 minutes away and the other one is about an hour away. So that's what it looks like living in a landlocked city here in New Zealand. We are the first country to see the sunrise, so we actually do get a lot of tourism over the New Year period for people wanting to be some of the first in the world to see in the new year, and that was particularly big around the year 2000 as we welcome that new millennium. We are rated as the least corrupt nation in the world. Now, we think that's pretty cool because it means that everything that happens at a government level and at a business level is very transparent, and our laws support that here in New Zealand. We also have a very low unemployment rate comparatively to a lot of countries in the world, and at the moment that is sitting at 5.1%, which for us is actually on the higher side typically. So normally it sits in the 4s but it is also trending down again at the moment, which is great. And we are free of animals that want to kill you. So a little great thing about living in New Zealand is we don't have any snakes or spiders that are poisonous. We do have one spider that may give you a bit of a rash, but that's really it. We've also got no land-based mammals which are going to chase you down and eat you. So I really like that. I'm a big hiker and I love running out on the trails, and I can just go out and not worry about anything trying to eat me or kill me, which I think is such a good bonus. We're also a very diverse country. So we were one of the last countries in the world to be colonized. We were colonized by Great Britain, and we are basically a country built on migrants. So the first migrants from the UK arrived in the 1800s, the early 1800s. And since then, we have had people come from all over the world to help build our diverse society. And that, as I mentioned, is reflected in our team here as well. And that's quite indicative of most workplaces in New Zealand as well. So there's always, no matter where you're coming from the world, there's always great communities that you can be part of with people from your home country, which is very cool. So here's just a bit of a map with all of our major cities and towns listed. So we call them cities, but for most places in the world, what we call a city is actually generally just a large town. The main ones to really focus on, we've got Auckland, which is our biggest city with a population of over 1 million people. So it's got over a fifth of our population. We've then got Hamilton, where we are based, which is about an hour south of Auckland. That's also another major hub within the North Island. Tauranga out on the coast is also a really fast-growing region. And then we've got Wellington at the bottom of the North Island there, and that is our capital here in New Zealand. So that's where our government is based. Most big businesses in the North Island would be typically Auckland, Hamilton, or Wellington. So that's often where you will see a lot of job opportunities. But that doesn't mean that those are the only places you will find jobs. We get clients going all throughout New Zealand. So we tend to recommend that you don't necessarily focus just on those big cities or large towns, depending on how you classify them. In the South Island, we've got Christchurch. Christchurch is the South Island's biggest city, and that is where we have an office. And then our next biggest city in the South Island is Dunedin. If you've seen lots of photos of our beautiful lakes and mountains, those typically tend to be shot in the Queenstown region, which is on the other side of the South Island. Cool. Yep, you can move on. Thanks, Fabien. So I will, actually, I am handing over to Fabien here. So
yeah, what do you mean?
He's just going to chat through a few different visa categories for us.
Great. Thanks a lot, Charlotte, for this great introduction. I'm Fabien. I'm another one of the licensed advisors based in Hamilton office, our main office in the North Island. I am a migrant myself. I moved to New Zealand in 2009 now, and I've been assisting migrants for 7-8 years do the same, essentially move to New Zealand. Now, one of the key considerations when people look at relocating overseas is naturally, can they bring their family in, under what parameters? So I'm just going to quickly touch on this subject of partnership, children, and parents even. Now, if you're looking to move to New Zealand with your partner, what Immigration New Zealand's looking for is they want to confirm that the relationship is genuine and likely to endure. And it's not so much whether you're married or not. Being married is not actually a requirement in any way. The emphasis is on whether you have been living together. And there's various ways this can be demonstrated and evidenced. Once you move to New Zealand with your partner, so depending on the visa you apply for, your partner naturally has the right to accompany you, but may also have a right to work, depending on your status for yourself as a supporting partner or the principal applicant. And typically the visa is granted for the same duration as the supporting partner. Various visa categories that you can apply for depending on your goals, but also the visa status of the supporting partner. So you can apply for partner of a worker or partner of a student visa holder. You might have fallen in love with a Kiwi as well, a New Zealand citizen or resident. There are different visa options to choose from. And it's important to understand that there are different thresholds and requirements whether you apply for a temporary visa or a resident class visas. And common issues we come across for partnership matters is where partners haven't lived together for enough time to warrant a specific visa. Or I have insufficient evidence of relationship. Key to the service that we provide is to guide you through that relationship evidence when we're doing such applications, and also whether the New Zealand partner may have supported a previous partner in the past. You only get 2 shots at this as a supporting New Zealand partner. Dependent children, naturally, you can come to New Zealand with your children under the vast majority of visa categories. Once again, slight differences whether you apply for temporary or residence class visas. The maximum age limit for a child to apply under you as a dependent child for a temporary visa is 19 inclusive. However, they get an extra 5 years in terms of threshold if you wish to include them in your residency application. And typically, Immigration New Zealand wants to make sure the kid is either age 17 and single, or 18 to 20 with no children and single. And from age 21 to 24, you might have to provide evidence of financial dependency as well. So typically, they're full-time students, they've been living with you or a relative, they don't earn enough money to sustain themselves, that's financially dependent. What you're going to have to do as well is establish the relationship to the child via different identity documents, such as typically a birth certificate or household registration documents for certain citizenships or countries of origin. What can a kid do? Naturally accompany their parents. Now, if they're age under 5, typically they get a visitor visa, but they can attend kindergarten or daycare. And then once they turn 5, they can, in most cases, apply for a dependent child student visa, which allows them to study at primary or secondary school. We'll touch on this a bit later, but school in New Zealand is mandatory from age 6 to 16, but typically children start primary school at the age of 5 and can attend school until the age of 18, 19. For older students, age 16 plus, they may actually be allowed to work part-time during studies just for pocket money, not any more than that. And in most cases, they also are eligible for public funded healthcare. So different visa categories that you can choose from as well, depending on your goals and your circumstances. This may be a visitor visa, a dependent child student visa, or if the children is over the age limit for secondary school, then you might want to look at a fee-paying student visa. We'll touch on that a bit later as well. And just a reminder that the age limit to include a dependent child in your residency application is 24 inclusive. Once they turn 25, they can no longer be included. Common issues we see with children applications is non-insatisfactory or insufficient financial dependency evidence. We also frequently have people reach out to us with issues when parents are divorced or separated, because the documents that Immigration New Zealand is looking for can be quite specific. Adult children whose parents are on temporary visas, again, those that are over the age limit, perhaps no longer attending secondary school. What are their options in terms of tertiary studies? And medical concerns for children. What does that mean in terms of being eligible for special support at school and that sort of thing? What are the consequences? There are a lot of considerations when we touch on these medical or special education support considerations, and we'd like to discuss these one-on-one. Last but not least, retirement. So there's no official retirement age in New Zealand, but most people will qualify for NZ Super at the age of 65, and that requires living and working in New Zealand for a certain amount of time, typically 10 to 20 years, depending on your date of birth. And there may be options to bring in your overseas pension as well. We can recommend some tax accountants to avoid getting double taxed if that is the case. Different visa categories as well. If you move to New Zealand yourself, you become a resident and you wish to bring your parents over later on. So these are what we call the sponsored visa categories, and there are quite a few to choose from. You can choose a 3-year grandparent visitor visa, allowing your parents to come and visit and help with the grandkids 6 months at a time. There are permanent options, residency options under the parent category, where your income as a sponsor is considered by Immigration New Zealand. There's also the parent retirement residency category, whereby your parents' income is considered and requires a little investment. And most recently announced is the Parent Boost visa that is launching in a few weeks from now and may allow your parents to come and visit multiple times for a period of up to 10 years. So a very, very generous immigration framework to support your extended family. If you wish to come to New Zealand and experience the country, but you don't have a New Zealand resident child in New Zealand, there is also a longer term, a 2-year visitor visa, whereby you need to do a small investment in the country and you can come and stay in New Zealand for up to 2 years. And that is called a temporary retirement visitor visa. In terms of health system, the New Zealand's health system is very, very good. There's a distinction to be made between accident and medical. So if you need medical care because of an unfortunate accident, you will be covered regardless of your visa status. And that's because we have a great scheme called ACC, Accident Compensation Corporation, that covers virtually anyone physically present in New Zealand. If you need to see a medical professional for medical reasons, so you fall ill or you have an acute condition, then you will be treated in the public system free of charge if you get granted a visa for 2 years or more, and that would cover yourself and your family. And naturally, if you're under a resident class visa, you will be covered as well. Now, if you're a student visa holder, let's say you're doing a master's in New Zealand, medical insurance is mandatory. So you're not going to be covered by the public funded healthcare, but you'll be covered under your private insurance. And if you come in to visit New Zealand, then you absolutely need insurance in case of an unfortunate illness. Schooling in New Zealand, that's an important consideration as well. If you decide to move to New Zealand with your children, with your kids, we have very good quality education. I'd say roughly, I think the latest figures mention 85% of children in public schools and the remainder in private or sort of integrated / hybrid schools. What your children are going to be eligible for depends on your visa status as a parent. In most cases, if you're on a work visa or on a resident visa, then of course your children can attend school free of charge. And this includes subsidized early childhood, but it does not include tertiary education. So anything university, polytech and above. If you are a resident class holder, though, and you have older kids, 20 and above, then their residence class visa will grant them the right to undertake tertiary studies as domestic students, so not paying international fees. And after a few years, you'll be eligible for interest-free student loans as well. Great. So in terms of tertiary education, New Zealand education is quite highly rated, keeping in mind how small our country in the world. I believe all of 8 universities are in the top 300 in the world. So in New Zealand, we have 8 large universities, 16 polytechs, and many, many private providers. As I touched on just a minute ago, you will pay international fees unless you're on a resident visa holder, but you can actually use tertiary education as a pathway to permanent relocation. And we'll discuss that towards the end of this presentation. New Zealand Shores are not only dealing with immigration and visas, we deal with visa education providers as well. So we can manage your enrollment because we're education agents for the vast majority of them. And as I just mentioned, we can guide you into choosing the right course precisely to build a pathway to long-term relocation. Over back to you, Charlotte.
Awesome. Thanks, Fabien. There's been a whole bunch of questions coming through the Q&A about jobs and where to look for jobs. So I have flicked some of you a little bit of info, but we will cover that shortly. So we're just going to cover off a little bit about New Zealand salaries and what it may look like in that job search process as well. So here we've just listed some up-to-date salaries for different industries. Now, bear in mind, salaries in New Zealand, much like anywhere else in the world, can largely be what's the word I want? Determined by where you are in New Zealand. So some of those bigger cities that I mentioned, like Auckland, Wellington, Christchurch, Dunedin, you are likely to be paid more than what you will in some of the smaller regions. But for things like healthcare and teachers, those salaries are standardized throughout New Zealand. So even if you are living in a smaller town, for example, as a primary school teacher, your salary threshold will always be 75,000 to 90,000 roughly, because that is what the government has determined. Healthcare workers are exactly the same because a lot of them sit under collective agreements based on what the government has determined. Your salaries will also, be the same regardless of where you are in the country. For a lot of our IT workers, our band there of software engineer that's likely to be quite similar for a lot of different IT occupations. But again, you may be on the lower end of that spectrum if you're living in a smaller region or town, but that does often mean that even though the salary financially is lower, that your money will often actually go further than it would in a bigger city. A lot of our trades workers would fall under that telecommunications technician pay bracket, 65,000 to 85,000 roughly. However, a lot of our technicians and trades workers do often work overtime, so you don't necessarily just work your standard 40-hour week as you may in an office, which means that your earning capacity can be a lot higher. Next slide there, Fabian. Tax in New Zealand is something we get asked about all the time because obviously each country has a different tax system and we're all very used to what we have at home. New Zealand has a tiered income tax system, which means that you don't actually pay a flat rate across your entire income. You will pay the percentage that is listed in that right column for that particular pay amount. So for the first 14,000 you only earn 10.5%, and then as we go up, the 14,000 to 15,600, you pay 12.2%, and so on and so forth. So you wouldn't, even if you were earning 180,000 a year or over, you wouldn't actually pay a flat 39% on your income. It is graduated, which makes it actually quite fair. Income tax is taken directly by your employer. So when your salary or your wages are paid into your bank account, they have already taken that tax out and they have already paid that to our Inland Revenue Department, which is our tax department. So unlike a lot of other places in the world where you have to file your own taxes and figure out how much you owe, if you're working as an employee, it's pretty much done for you. Some years you may get a refund, or some years you may owe some money if perhaps you've worked overtime, or if you get bonuses and your employer hasn't filed it correctly, but it won't be a massive bill. It may just be a little bit a difference. I tend to get refunds, which is always quite nice, but I do know some people that end up having to pay a little bit of tax each year. So it can be, it can be anywhere in between there. As we've got there, it's approximately 25% on average if you're earning 100,000, which is a very comfortable salary here in New Zealand. So I'm just going to chat through our New Zealand visa types. I will just preface this with everyone in New Zealand, if you're coming on the basis of skilled employment, has to have a job offer before you can apply for a visa. So that does relate to both work visas and residency. Unfortunately, there's no way around that. We can't get you a work visa if you're planning to come and work without you having the job offer first. There were a few questions popping through about that. So just to clear that up from the outset. So in terms of temporary visas, we have one type of work visa, and that is what we call an accredited employer work visa. So anyone coming into New Zealand on the basis of skilled employment will apply for that accredited employer work visa. There is no other option that we can obtain at the moment for permanent or fixed term employment. Under that accredited employer work visa, you can bring your partners and children. So partners would obtain an open partnership work visa, and children are able to obtain a student visa, which will allow them to attend school up until the day they turn 19. There are, in terms of family and partnership and student visas, as Fabian's already gone through, we have got those different options. So if you are the partner of a New Zealand citizen or resident, or if you're coming to study as an international student, there's separate options for those. New Zealand does also offer working holiday visas. So we have about 30 countries where we have reciprocal agreements, where if you're under the ages of 30 or 35, you are able to obtain an open work visa to come and live and work in New Zealand for anywhere between 1 to 3 years. Different countries' schemes offer different durations and have different age limit thresholds. If you're just wanting to come on holiday and check out our beautiful country, or even if you've decided you want to move, but you want to come out to have a bit of a look before you engage on that process, we do also have visitor visas. Some countries you don't necessarily need to apply for a visitor visa before you come, but it will depend on the passport you hold effectively as to whether or not you need to apply for a visitor visa before traveling. The working holiday visa is a really great option if you are eligible. And if you are eligible, it is one way to get yourself into the country to start looking for work. It is an open work visa. Some schemes don't quite allow you to take up permanent employment. So if you do come in under the basis of a working holiday visa, secure a full-time permanent job offer in New Zealand, and you may then need to move over to the accredited employer work visa quite quickly. But your visa will stipulate that in the conditions. So it's not a one case fits all scenario, because each different country has different requirements. There is a quota attached to some of them. So for some countries, there will only be a limit to the number of working holiday visas that can be granted each year. However, for other countries, it is unlimited. So again, it just depends what country you are from and the passport you are holding. It is a great way, as I mentioned, to start that process and then progress on to longer term options if that's something you're interested in, or it can be used simply to just come and experience life in New Zealand for a period of time. It is flexible. As I mentioned, some will require you to hold insurance. If it doesn't require you to hold insurance, it is still recommended, because you may not be eligible for healthcare in New Zealand under your working holiday visa. Cool. So as I mentioned, we just have one type of work visa if you are coming into New Zealand on the basis of skilled employment, and that is our accredited employer work visa. Now, an accredited employer work visa, there are a few things to be aware of. So it is tied to an employer, which means that when your visa is approved, it will stipulate that you can work for the employer that supported you through that process and in that particular region which they are based. If you do decide that you don't like your job, or you just want to move somewhere else, there is a process you can go through to change the conditions on that visa to allow you to work for a different employer, but you must have had that variation of conditions approved before you can move on to a new employment. So that is something to be wary of. If you don't do that, you will actually be in breach of your visa, and that's not a good situation to be in. Accredited employer work visas are granted for 3 to 5 years. The vast majority of people do get 5 years outright. However, if you are a lower skilled worker, you may obtain a 3-year visa. If you are a lower skilled worker, often the maximum duration you can hold is 3 years, and then you may need to have a stand down period and leave New Zealand. Even if you're a high skilled worker, if you reach the end of your 5-year work visa and you haven't applied for residence, that stand down period will apply to you as well. So it is really important from the start of your migration process that you establish what that pathway to residency may look like. So you know that from the moment you enter New Zealand, how long it's going to take you to apply for residence, or the particular conditions you need to meet to be able to do so. Some clients will come in to New Zealand where we know at that point in time they don't yet have a pathway to residence, but we do know that within that 5-year period we can help them work towards obtaining a resident visa. So it's just worth having a discussion with a licensed advisor as to what that may look like for you. If you're coming in on an accredited employer work visa, you are entitled to public funded healthcare in New Zealand. So we have free healthcare effectively. If you get sick or injured, you will go to the hospital and you can be treated. And then everything else is subsidized. So for an example, it cost me $30 to go see my GP, so it's not very expensive at all. And children up to the age of 13 are completely free. So that's a really great benefit. As I mentioned, you can also bring your partner and children with you. And if you are granted a 3-year or a 5-year work visa, your partner and children will be granted the corresponding duration. So everyone will come into the country on the same visa type. You do just have to be mindful that there are some salary thresholds attached to be able to sponsor partners and children, and any low-skilled workers typically aren't actually able to bring children or partners with them to New Zealand. So that is, again, another thing to be mindful of. But that is where we can do an assessment of your situation and make sure that we've told you the pay rate you need to obtain to make sure your family can come and what is actually deemed a skilled role. There's a couple processes that the employer has to go through first before you can apply for your accredited employer work visa. The first step is what we call employer accreditation. It's basically a process where they have to apply to Immigration New Zealand and prove that they are a good employer. So that means that they have proved that they have never breached employment law or immigration law. So Immigration New Zealand will say, yes, we know that you are going to look after your migrant employees. The second part of that process is what we call a job check. Now, a job check, depending on your role, will vary what that job check process looks like.
So the job check is the second stage, essentially. There are a couple aspects to the job check. It is entirely up to the employer to demonstrate to immigration that they're hiring you because they need your skill set in New Zealand. So in most cases, they're going to need to do what we call a labor market test. So essentially advertising the role for 2, sometimes 3 weeks to show that they can't find a Kiwi to fill the position. And once that labor market test is done, they can then apply for a job check with Immigration New Zealand with a template employment agreement. Once again, Immigration New Zealand checks all the right clauses against employment law, and then the employer gets what we call a token, which they send to you electronically or to us as your immigration representative. And with that token, we can apply for the accredited employer work visa online as well. And that token is what links you as a migrant to the employer as the employer. Different last step of the process, essentially. The work visa is something on your side as the candidate. You must demonstrate that you're competent for the role. So there is a baseline in terms of experience from immigration. So you need to show that you've got, either a bachelor's degree or 2 years relevant experience. And you must also meet the employer requirements, whether they ask for a specific qualification or a specific number of years of experience. Under most visa categories, and certainly this one, you're going to have to demonstrate to Immigration New Zealand that you meet their health and character requirements. Essentially, that means that you must be overall healthy, no serious conditions, and that you have no major prior convictions. So minor conditions, minor health conditions, and minor previous conviction are not necessarily the end of the road. There are means and ways of convincing Immigration New Zealand that you're going to be fine, but this may require additional work. For those lower skilled occupations, you might also need an English test. Lastly, what is a job change? So oftentimes when you talk about the 5-year accredited employer work visa, people are under the impression that they are sort of stuck with an employer for 5 years, but that's not right. That's not true at all. You can, if things don't work out, personality clash, or you find yourself not in a workplace that you feel is the right fit for you, or you find a better offer elsewhere, you can do what we call a job change, which essentially varies the conditions of your visa to allow you to move regions or occupation or employer, and then your visa is updated accordingly. Cool.
I can take over if you want,
All right.
Fabien. Sorry, everyone. I was a bit sick last week and I've still got a bit of a cough, so I am sorry.
No problem.
So thank you. On our residency visas, so we have got a few different categories. The main two that most people will be eligible under who are listening to this webinar are our green list occupations and our skilled migrant category. So as I mentioned, the green list categories, there are 2 tiers. So tier 1 is jobs which are able to apply for straight to residence, and tier 2, it is a work to residence process. So straight to residence, as the name suggests, you can apply directly to residence once you've got that job offer. Tier 2 of the green list requires you to work in New Zealand for 2 years before you're able to apply. Our skilled migrant category, you may be able to apply straight away, or you may have to work in New Zealand for up to 3 years. And both of those are based on having a job offer or already working in New Zealand. New Zealand Shores can also assist with family categories. So we've got partnership visas, dependent child visas. So perhaps you've obtained permanent residence yourself, or you've obtained citizenship through descent and you want to then bring your children to New Zealand. That's where that dependent child visa would come in. And if your partner is an Australian citizen or resident, they are also able to sponsor you under that partnership category as well. Slightly different process, but we can help you guide through that. We can also assist with investment visas and entrepreneur visas. Thresholds are a lot higher for those two business pathways, but we do have advisors in-house who specialize in those pathways as well. But as most people will be interested in those skilled employment pathways, that's what we will talk through over the next few slides. So as I mentioned, 2 tiers to the green list categories. So green list is a whole bunch of occupations where Immigration New Zealand have determined that we really need these people. Straight to residency is a total of 151 occupations on that tier 1. It's a lot of healthcare workers, some ICT roles, and then a whole bunch of construction manager, project manager type roles in there as well. What straight to resident means is once you've got that job offer in New Zealand, you can actually apply for residency while you are still offshore. Some people may choose to come into New Zealand on a work visa first and then apply once they're onshore, and there may actually be some cases where we do recommend that you do that. Could be because there's a health or character concern within the family that we know is going to take longer to process, or it may be that you come from a country which has to undergo extra scrutiny with Immigration New Zealand. So some people do have to go through what we call a national security check. Parts of Asia, the Middle East, Africa are forced through that process by Immigration New Zealand, and they can take 6 to 9 months. So if we know that there's any of those issues present, we would still recommend you come into New Zealand on temporary visas first, purely because your employer may not want to wait 6 to 9 months for you to arrive into the country, but we can give you guidance in that space. Tier 2 of the green list, we have got some teachers on there, even though a number of teachers are also under tier 1 as well. And then there's basically a whole bunch of tradesmen under that list. And as I mentioned, those people have to work in New Zealand for 2 years and meet the specific criteria attached before they can apply. All of our skilled employment residence categories, you have to be 55 inclusive or younger to apply. So that means you have up until the day day before you turn 56 to be able to apply for residence under that category. You do need to apply within that time frame. Otherwise, if you even leave it a day over your 56th birthday, you won't be eligible. So that is really something to be mindful of. You may need to demonstrate your English proficiency. Even if you are from a country where English is your first language, you will need to be able to show that you have either undertaken education or at least 5 years of employment in an English-speaking background. If English is not the first language in your home country, then you may need to sit an English language test as well. Regardless of whether you're applying under tier 1 or tier 2 of the green list, each occupation has specific criteria you need to meet. So for example, for our healthcare professionals, they simply need to meet what we call median wage, which at the moment is $31.61 per hour and is due to increase in August to $33.63 per hour. They need to hold an occupational registration as well. Some of our ICT professionals just have to meet a certain pay threshold, and that at the moment is roughly about $136,000 per year. A lot of our tradesmen will need to hold a relevant qualification and have obviously worked in New Zealand for 2 years. So it does depend on the industry that you are applying for as to what that specific criteria will be. You do have to meet that criteria word for word. So Immigration New Zealand won't look at it holistically, unfortunately, and say, okay, you've got 10 years work experience, therefore we know you're skilled in that role. You have to meet that criteria specifically. So that is just something to be very mindful of. So the benefits to applying for straight to residency is that you enter New Zealand outright with the same rights as a New Zealand citizen, effectively. You can enter into our retirement scheme, KiwiSaver, you can vote, you can purchase a home, you are still entitled to free healthcare, your children can still attend public school for free in New Zealand, and you can include your partner and children in that same application. So it is one application per family. As I mentioned, different criteria. So engineers, it's purely qualifications. Medical professionals and teachers, it's registration. And ICT professionals is hourly rate only. Tier 2 of the green list, much like Tier 1, that once you get residence, you have the same rights as a New Zealand citizen, but again, different criteria attached to each occupation within that list. So it does vary quite significantly, more so with Tier 2 than Tier 1. Some occupations may need to have a combination of medium wage plus qualification plus certain work experience, whereas some it's more straightforward and it's just based on pay rate. So depending on what your occupation is, again, we can guide you in what you will need exactly to meet that green list criteria. The skilled migrant category, we are actually anticipating an announcement on changes to the skilled migrant category coming within the next 2 to 3 months. We met with the Immigration Minister Friday last week, who we knew the changes were coming, but we didn't know when, and she has signaled to us that it will be within the next 2 to 3 months. So what I tell you today may look slightly different in a few months' time. It is much like Tier 1 and Tier 2 of the green list. You do have to apply before the day you turn 56 to be eligible, and it is a point system. The points are made up of a number of factors. The majority of your points will come from one of three things. So it will either be the salary you earn in New Zealand, so the salary from your job offer, or it may be from holding a particular occupational registration, or it may come from the qualification that you hold. At the moment, in order to claim points based on qualification, you have to hold a bachelor's degree or higher. However, this is old policy that the last government brought in, and we do know that that is one thing that they are looking to change. They're looking to expand that criteria of eligibility. So for example, at the moment, if you have a bachelor's degree, that is worth 3 points, and then the remainder of your 3 points will come from having worked in New Zealand for an additional 3 years. We do know the minister is also not entirely happy with how long it can take some people to obtain residence. So we may see some changes in that space as well, where people who are eligible under the skilled migrant category can apply earlier. However, until government actually release that policy in 2 to 3 months' time, we won't know exactly what that looks like. We've just got a bit of a case study, so I'll get you to go back, Fabien, because one way people can qualify under this category is their wage threshold. So anyone who's earning 1.5 times the median wage, which at the moment is set at $47.41 per hour, and that is definitely on the higher side, particularly for someone like a trades worker. They are actually on a pathway to residency, though, if they can meet that. So this person here is 52 years old, so they're going to have just enough time to be able to apply for residence. They don't have a qualification, but they are earning that 1.5 times the median wage, which they get 3 points for. And then the remainder of their 3 points will come from New Zealand work experience, so they can claim a total of 6. So it's just the category is somewhat flexible, but the government is looking to make it more flexible so we can attract and retain the skilled staff that we need in New Zealand in the future.
Thank you, Charlotte. I just wanted to, I just had a question, which is a nice segue into this next slide. If you're a recent bachelor graduate or bachelor with honors, or you're at the point in your career where you feel you're looking for a change or it's time to upskill, then we highly recommend the student pathway as a means to move to New Zealand towards a dedicated, precise time frame. So essentially what this means is study to work, study to secure residency. And it's important to be very careful when choosing the course, particularly if you have family, because not all courses will qualify for family visas, and also study towards something that will lend you a job and actually create a pathway to employment and to residency for you. A few things to be mindful of. As an international student, you'll pay international fees, which is roughly 3 times what domestic students are paying in New Zealand. Depending on your country of origin, this may not be an expensive exercise. I know compared to the US or Canada, even international fees in New Zealand are somewhat cheaper. Compared to South Africa, perhaps, or even Singapore, it's slightly more expensive. We at New Zealand Shores act as education agents, so we can recommend the right course for you. We can manage the enrollment and the visa as well. And as a best case scenario, upon graduating, it would essentially you and your family perhaps would secure a post-study work visa, allowing you to stay and work in any job for any employer for up to 3 years. So it's very important that we work with you on where you want to study. So choosing the right location, work towards your timeframes as well. So when do you want to study? Some courses have a rolling intake every week or every 2 weeks. Others have one intake per year. In many cases, teaching courses only allow new students in January, and other courses might have some intakes in January, May, July, and November, for instance. So very important to discuss with us as education agents what would work with you, work for you. We have a couple of case studies for the student pathways. So as an example here, if you were to study a Master of Software Engineering, it would take 1 or 1.5 years to graduate, depending on the choice provider and course. Now, because this is a level 9 master's qualification, this actually qualifies to allow you to bring your partner and children during your studies. Your children will actually, as a matter of fact, be granted fully open work rights. So he or she can work in any job for any employer, and your children can also get free education, and that's primary or secondary school. So very generous immigration framework for students in study, but also post-study. So once again, a level 9 master's course will, upon graduation, allow you to seek a 3-year post-study work visa and matching visas for your family if applicable. Now, what this means is that you're looking to secure employment, skill employment, that will actually allow you to apply for residency later. And if you recall what Charlotte was discussing regarding the skill migrant point system, well, a master's level qualification counts towards the skill migrant points for a whole 5 points, which means you only need to work in New Zealand for 1 year to secure that missing point, and then you can apply for residency. And another example we assist with a lot is studying teaching in New Zealand. So you could study, for instance, a graduate diploma in primary or secondary school, or a master's in teaching. 1 to 1.5 years. It varies depending on the provider and how intense a course you want to opt for. Some can be pretty jam-packed in 12 months. These courses qualify for family visas as well. And then you should be able to get, depending on the course you opt for, a graduate diploma might warrant a 1 to 2 years post-study visa. A Master of Teaching will warrant a 3-year post-study visa. But the point of this case study is that upon graduation, you'll actually meet the qualification requirements for Teaching Council registration. In the vast majority of cases, in our experience, towards the end of your qualification, you need to do a practicum in a school, and very often, because teachers are in such shortage, will actually hire you full time. With that registration and a job offer, you can actually apply for residency immediately. So even shorter a pathway in terms of study to residency. As education agents, we represent all the top universities, polytech or private providers in New Zealand, and we can also work with private English schools, sometimes embedded within universities if you need to polish up on your English a little before undertaking a postgraduate program, for instance. A question we get quite often is what's the difference between residency and PR? So permanent residency or citizenship, how do I get a passport? So all the residency options that we've just covered will get you a resident class visa. So essentially, you can remain in New Zealand indefinitely, but all of these visas come with 2-year travel conditions attached. Now, the only requirement for you to then upgrade to PR, as we casually call it, is that you commit to living in New Zealand as a resident for at least 2 years. Not the full 2 years, just half the time at least. So at least 6 months year 1 and 6 months year 2. And then this will allow you to apply to lift your travel condition in the form of a permanent residency application. And then from that point onward, you can leave New Zealand if you wish to do so. You can always come back later in the future as a permanent resident. If you want to progress on to citizenship, then it's another 3 years from permanent residence. And again, some presence requirements apply. So a commitment to living in New Zealand for a full 5 years as a resident. Now, some countries allow dual citizenship. New Zealand is one of them, but other countries may require that if you want to become a New Zealand citizen, you renounce your home citizenship. So something to be checked on your side. Now, Charlotte, would you like to discuss Aussie versus New Zealand? You're on mute.
Absolutely. Thanks, Fabian. So we won't really dive into Australia just because this webinar today is largely focused around migrating to New Zealand. However, we do also have our sister company, which is Australian Shores, and we have Australian licensed advisors within our team. There are a couple key differences between Australia and New Zealand. So Australia does offer pathways that don't require a job offer. Whereas New Zealand, you do have to have a job offer in order to apply for residence in New Zealand on the basis of skilled employment. Australia is a much bigger country. New Zealand is obviously smaller, and we are at the very bottom of the world, which some people love and some people do find an adjustment. Australia can be what we call a backdoor to New Zealand. So if you do manage to obtain a permanent resident visa in Australia, that can also allow you to live in New Zealand, which is great. It does give you the options and flexibility for both. However, it can take several years to actually get that permanent residence. So it's not a quick backdoor into the country, but it can definitely be an option. Unfortunately, New Zealand doesn't allow this, Australia doesn't allow the same option for our permanent residents. So if you hold permanent residence in New Zealand, it doesn't actually automatically qualify you to live in Australia. So that's just one thing to be mindful of. If you did obtain permanent residence here and then you decided you wanted to move to Australia, you would still have to follow a prescribed visa process to do so. Some benefits of moving to New Zealand rather than Australia is we do have a higher age limit for residency. So in Australia, the cutoff to be able to apply for residence is 45, whereas in New Zealand, it's 55. So that gives you another 10 years to be able to obtain residence here. New Zealand does offer quicker pathways to residency as well. So if you're looking at moving quickly and obtaining residence quickly, then New Zealand is definitely the destination for you. We are more generous around our family visa options and entitlements to families. So depending on the visa you migrate on to Australia, your children may not be entitled to free education and you may not be entitled to free healthcare in New Zealand. Whereas for the vast majority of our skilled migrants coming into New Zealand, you will actually get that free healthcare and education, which is a bonus. And if you are coming to study as an international student, we can help you formulate a pathway that will obtain residence here, whereas it's not always necessarily the case in Australia. It's just, I guess, yeah, weigh up your options as to what you're really looking for. We think New Zealand's pretty amazing. Fabian obviously chose to migrate to New Zealand. I was born here, but I've traveled a lot around the world and I will always return home. Plus, there's lots of snakes and spiders in Australia that will bite you and definitely poison you. So that's one big drawing factor, I think, for New Zealand.
For those interested in Australia, we have a separate website called Australian Shores because we do assist with Australian visas as well, and matching YouTube channels where we have some of these webinars recorded. So it's about weighing up your options and where you're looking to go. We'll quickly skim over all of these because we're running out of time. So in a nutshell, are you happy for me to cover this, Charlotte?
Yeah, of course, absolutely. Go ahead.
Awesome. So industries that recruit in New Zealand are typically and have been for a long time healthcare, teaching, IT, trades and constructions to help with building out infrastructure, engineering to some degree, although these can be quite niche. It's largely in telco, I believe, but also civil roading and transportation. And the type of occupations that are picked in to feature on our green list typically reflect those industries. What is it like to work in New Zealand? So a standard offer is 4 weeks paid leave, 37 to 40 hours per week, standard working week, and you'll get 10 days sick leave per year to use for yourself or your close family. New Zealand is a very flexible and family-friendly environment, and this is really reflected in the workplace as well. So there's a lot of flexibility from both employers and workers in terms of where you want to work, what your role looks like. If you need to leave a bit earlier to cover kids pickup or anything like this, employers are usually quite amenable to this. And just to look back into some of the slides in our introduction, New Zealand is a very diverse country, and this is certainly reflected in the workplace. When you start looking for jobs in New Zealand, you need to be mindful of regional demand. So it's something that typically we discuss early on when we engage with offshore migrants. What is your profile? What does that look like? Where would you like to end up? Where would you recommend that you look for work? It's important to keep in mind that 2/3 of our population is in the North Island. Half of that at least is in the Auckland larger metro. But that also means that some employers in the South Island are really crying out for workers, skilled workers, particularly in the trades industries. How to tackle the job market? There's different ways to approach it. As part of our service, we provide a job search package with a reformatted CV, a format that we know New Zealand employers respond well to. A template cover letter, representation letter, and if and when we have connections with relevant employers or recruiters, we'll certainly put you in touch to try and help with interviews. But other than this, we often recommend LinkedIn networking. Coming to New Zealand to visit, to look, see, and decide. Look around, see if you like it. Decide if you like to live in New Zealand. And also for certain roles like teaching, for instance, or any client-facing job, meeting with the employer in person could be the recommendation there. So maybe coming as a visa waiver if your country scheme allows for it, or apply for a visitor visa. Now, why work with us? We've been around for a long time. We're one of the largest immigration consultancies in New Zealand with over, I think it's almost 25,000 actually, visa applications for New Zealand and Australia. Well over 98% visa approval rating, just under 99. And we have experience on both sides of the job. What that means is that some of our advisors used to work for Immigration New Zealand. Therefore, we know how to think, what they're looking for in certain types of application, and this helps a lot in presenting your application in the best possible way. We do invite you, if you wish to be represented with Immigration New Zealand and use immigration agents, we do invite you to do your homework. Shop around by all means. We know that we provide very fair fees for the consultancy work that we do. So we'd be happy to do an eligibility assessment or a visa pathway report and a full quote for our services. We can't just put some pricing on here on the slide deck because it depends on the visa pathway you're going to be eligible for. And this could be very different whether you have to go through a set of temporary visas and then residency, or if you can apply directly for residency. We have advisors across 4 different offices, both in New Zealand and in South Africa, allowing that multi-country presence and assisting our clients worldwide across different time zones. So we find this very handy. And we have no complaints in the last 15 years that our company's been around with the IAA. So the IAA is the Immigration Advisors Authority, which is the government body that regulates our profession. So very proud of this. Because we have 3 offices in New Zealand, we can be your employer liaison, so we can act on your behalf. If you apply for roles and you see you get a bit of interest from an employer in a particular region, your allocated advisor can pick up the phone and sort of demystify the immigration process from the employer side of things. We do find generally that this helps a lot, particularly lifting some of those barriers that some employers might have. Everyone has unique circumstances. No 2 applications are the same. Immigration knows that. Every application is assessed on its own merit, and we also know this. So we like to, as a matter of fact, if you work with New Zealand Shores, you'll have a dedicated advisor allocated to your case, and that person will be your main point of contact. So you develop that relationship and deep knowledge of your circumstances and your goals to allow us to provide the best possible pathway for you and your family. Because mistakes are costly, a visa application, the government fees alone can set you back anywhere from 800 to over 6,000 New Zealand dollars. So yes, you might be able to do it yourself, but yes, you might also fail, and it's going to be very costly for you. Facebook is a wonderful resource. Sometimes people like to help, but there's also a lot of incorrect or completely outdated information on social media. So be very careful what you read and don't act on what you read. Very important because more often than not, this advice, like I said, might be outdated or bluntly incorrect. What's the next step? If you haven't had an eligibility assessment from us already, we strongly encourage you to reach out to us again. Just send us a quick email and say, hey, can I get a visa report on eligibility assessment? We'll look at your CV if we have it on file and determine what the best pathway for you might be. And then we'll invite you for a personal consultation afterwards. So to talk into, the specifics or if only just to meet face to face. And then we can discuss the specifics of your circumstances and what it is that you're trying to achieve. And then if you'd like to engage with us, we have a contract in place and we can commence work with you on your migration. Great. We're running over time, I feel. What do you think, Charlotte? Do we have time for 3, 4 questions? We've
I
answered
think
a lot of questions in writing, I see.
I see we've answered 49 questions in total. So we may have covered all of them, but let's just take
Yeah,
2 minutes to answer 2 or 3 questions and then we'll let everyone get on with their day.
awesome. Okay, so I'll start off. I'm a skilled plumber with 24 years experience. What are my options? So the first thing that springs to mind is that plumbers are on tier 2 of the green list, which means as long as you can secure registration with a plumbing board, and we can guide you through this, and you secure a role, and we can probably assist with this as well, then it means you're going to be applying for the 5-year accredited employee work visa. And after 2 years on the job, you can apply for residency through that tier 2 work to residence pathway of the green list. Great. Do you have a question in front of you, Charlotte, or?
Yes, sorry, everyone. I closed my list there. Apologies. I will just pull them up. So a question that actually has popped probably in the chat more is people often ask us about, do we assist with relocation assistance, finding housing, etc. We don't as a company. So that is something that we can give some guidance on, but we don't actively go out and look for jobs for you. We don't pick up people from the airport. We don't look for housing, but we do provide our settlement guide, and our settlement guide has a whole bunch of information in there about bank accounts, how to apply for tax numbers, the best places to look for housing. There's a whole bunch of information in there to help you get set up with your move to New Zealand. So whilst we don't actually walk you through that particular part of the process, we do try to hold your hand through that process as much as possible.
Awesome. And I'll probably close with that last question. What are visa options for healthcare workers? This is actually quite a broad question, but I'll divide into 2 options really. If you're a nursing assistant or healthcare worker, there is actually a dedicated pathway for your type of skill set, which we haven't covered today. It's called the Care Workforce Sector Agreement, and it allows you on the basis of a job offer to apply for residency after 2 years. So you would start off with a work visa, and then you would apply for residency after 2 years on the job. For the vast majority of registered health professionals, we're talking GPs, registered nurses, I see we have a lot of dentists in the audience. Then as long as you can secure registration with a relevant council and a job offer, which also in the vast majority of cases we might be able to assist with, then you can apply straight for residency. So again, this is for health professionals under which who must work under occupational registration in New Zealand. You have a pathway, a very straightforward pathway to residency through the Green List Tier 1. And then we had a few questions slightly outside of the frame of our presentation, people who have Australian citizenship by descent or people looking to be sponsored under the parent category, that sort of thing. Please do email us either through via info@newzealandshores.com or charlotte@newzealandshores.com or fabien@newzealandshores.com, and then we'll respond to you personally. I think that's it for us today.
Awesome. Thank you so much, everyone, for attending. I do apologize for my little coughing fit in the middle there, but thank you for taking over, Fabien. Again, please do reach out This webinar has been recorded, so we will edit out my little coughing fit and email it out to everyone. So if you haven't attended today, or you have attended and you want to listen to the information again, that will be in your inbox shortly. Have a great rest of your day or evening, and we look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.